I'm Sam Fragoso, the host of Talk Easy, distributed through Higher Ground. With me,
Hi, I'm Julio Himede from Yellow Studio, production designer. Nice to be here.
thank you to the person in the back who wooed for us. I want to start at a very simple place. We have behind us some incredible work that would not have been possible without you. That was a better woo. That was good.
Yeah.
You've said that every production you work on is trying to tell a story. So tell me, when you and your team begin working with Bad Bunny, describe the story behind the performance.
Well,
I know, sorry, we're jumping right in here. So
okay. Well, it was actually, we met with Benito several times, and he was in the middle of preparing a tour, but he was committed to the Super Bowl and gave us as much time as possible. And he basically wanted to tell a story of celebration. There was no talk about being controversial. He just wanted to be authentic and celebratory. And he wanted to create a landscape that accommodated dance, rhythm, and storytelling. So it was our job to then try to come up with a landscape that fitted all his messages. So we put a team together of incredible creative directors and other designers to come up with this incredible, I guess, in a very short period time, this incredible, unique landscape that was.
How much time did you have for it?
Well, we had about 4 months to put it together.
Okay.
And in those 4 months, the first thing that you get when you work with an artist like this in a big show is you get this set list. And you work out that there are about 12, 13 songs, and we have 12, 13 minutes. So that's almost, the music is almost your script, right? Like when you do an opera, when you do a film, you get a script. When you do the Super Bowl, you get given the music. And so that was our Bible to work from.
When you're putting a show like this together, how much are you, on the creative side, how much are you weighing the fact that you have 70,000 spectators in the stadium, in a stadium like this one, versus 125 million people watching at home? Like, how do you satisfy both? Is that something you guys are talking about?
I have no idea. No, I do. It's an interesting question. You have to work and communicate with the camera director from the very beginning. And you have to be able to, I guess, design for both. And in this particular Super Bowl, we had incredible moments that were a huge spectacle, like when he goes on top of the casita or the power lines. But we also had moments that were more intimate, right? Like when he gave the Grammy to a younger, version of himself. Those little moments are more intimate. We wanted to make sure that we capture those so that our audience were able to understand and follow our narrative. So we have to cater for both. It's difficult, but also there was a great sense in the stadium and a great energy even before he came on. People started clapping the minute we started bringing all the equipment, all the set pieces. So I think the audience in the stadium felt as special to be part of such an incredible, unique performance.
I think this Super Bowl performance holds the record, and don't quote me on this, but holds the record for making the most amount of people cry during a Super Bowl performance. I mean, it is such a moving piece. There was a 6-minute load-in window, 400 dancers, hidden cameras with surprise reveals. I have a hard time getting 4 friends together for dinner. Like, how the hell does this happen? Tell me, walk me through the night before. Do you sleep? Are you taking sleeping medication? When you wake up, do you have anxiety? I mean, tell me what's going on.
Well, there are hundreds and thousands of people involved, and I'm not kidding, thousands of people who make it all happen, who are very good at their jobs. But we only, when we get to the stadium, we only have about 5 or 6 rehearsals. You will think that we will have, take after take, but we only have about 5 because the NFL has to use the stadium to practice the day before or 2 days before. So I think the Thursday before the Sunday game was the last time we had a rehearsal. And there's a lot of people behind who, and there's a lot of interesting barriers that we get given because whatever we bring into the field, we can't damage the grass because, by the way, there is a game that continues after the performance, which I kept forgetting.
Right, I keep forgetting there's a football game too. Yeah.
But we have to take all that into consideration.
Yeah, what are the barriers for people who maybe don't know about that?
Well, it's basically everything that we put on stage, all these set pieces, this car that you're seeing now, it has to be very light in weight. So everything has to be taken into consideration. All these set pieces come into these very small tunnels that the stadiums have, which we call vomitories. So everything has to fit through there and then has to be put together to grow. So there's a lot of limitations. And when you only have 6 minutes to put it together during the commercial break, there's a lot of engineering that comes with it.
Are you yelling? Are you calm under pressure? What's your approach?
I'm definitely not yelling. No, everything is in order. Even though it looks chaotic, there is an order, and there's a lot of communication. So, and by that stage, by the way, it's kind of out of my hands. If anything happens or changes or anything goes wrong, there's nothing I can do. But the night before, I barely slept. I think I was scared of the whole design process until the show went live because I kept thinking, usually in my design approach, my style is quite minimalistic. This wasn't minimalistic. This was basically a lot of interesting set pieces that fill the stadium. And so in my head, I kept thinking, we have too much stuff. We have a lot of crap going on. So is it going to work? Are the audience going to follow? But they did. So
I think everyone here followed along just fine. It was really special.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to talk about your background a little bit. You're born in El Salvador. Your family moves to Australia when you're 12 years old. Eventually, you attend NIDA, which is the National Institute of Dramatic Arts in Sydney, a school that has produced Cate Blanchett, Baz Luhrmann, and of course, yourself. You've said in the past that NIDA, quote, toughened me up to the real world. How did it do that?
Well, as a design student, and I'm sure many people here might relate to, when you go to design school, it's incredibly tough. Me and my classmates were there until probably 2 a.m. every night. And we were only there until 2 a.m. because the doors of the school shut at 2 and we had to get out. And one time, me and another girl thought it was a good idea to just hide and keep working after they shut down, and we got caught. We had to keep model making. Anyway, that's a different story. But I think it toughens you up because you have to present in front of a panel every time you have ideas. And I did set and costume design. And so for every project, the school will invite professionals from the opera or from a ballet or from a film. And Baz Luhrmann came to, I remember, witness and they will give you critique. And so it was like professionals criticizing our work and giving us constructive criticism. And sometimes it was, very good, and sometimes they were quite brutal to us.
Do you remember a moment when it was very brutal? Do you have something that you've held on to?
I think it was on my first or second year, and I think they asked me what something meant, why I had designed such thing on my stage. And I just happened to say, because it looks good. I didn't have a theory behind it, and I got heavily criticized for that, and they shut me down. And I learned very quickly not to say that and to have a meaning behind every decision that I make. And I'm sure that we can all relate that here. But sometimes it just looks good. So.
And the professors, what was the culture at that college like? Because I heard you talk in the past that it was pretty strict.
It was
They'd sometimes throw textbooks out the windows, and
Yeah, it was
it seemed
very
like it was
strict.
intense.
It was a very small, intimate school, and the success rate of the students is pretty high. It's like a family, to be honest, but they are very strict. It's an institution, and I remember at the time, if you were late 5 minutes, 3 times, you got kicked out. Um, so it was tough, but you learn an incredible amount of things. And I think even though I was doing set and costume design, I think what's amazing about being in a school like that is that you learn the fundamental skills of designing. Whether you become an interior designer or an architect, or you know, there's a certain amount of fundamental skills that you get taught, and I appreciate that.
There's a lot of people here and people watching that are young artists right now trying to figure it out. Do you feel like young kids, especially with the advent of social media and cell phones, I sound like I'm 1,000 years old when I say this, but do you feel like there's room for young artists to fail? And how important is it to fall short and learn from your mistakes?
I think you learn a lot when you fail. You know, the amount of times that I kept making mistakes when I was younger. But I think it's important because you learn. You have to stand up for yourself and learn. I think my advice is I kept saying yes to all these jobs when I was younger, even though I didn't enjoy them or they didn't pay well. I did a few jobs for free. But I will say to younger people to sort of be interested in the project and to try things out, even if you're not that interested, because there might be one person there that might give you another opportunity, right? And that's how I started. Somebody saw me and they gave me another opportunity and they called and then the phone started ringing. So for that reason, I will say, try as much as you can and see how you go.
Let's talk about your first live opportunity that you got. This is the opening and closing ceremony of the Olympics in 2000. How old were you when you got this job?
I was 23 and I got the job just after I graduated as an assistant to the design team for the
It's a good
Sydney
first
Olympics.
job out of college.
Yeah, first job. It was like a year and a half, incredible budgets, and it kind of ruined me forever because after the job, after the Olympics, I thought every job had incredible budgets, but they didn't. But it was an incredible live event where we got to try every idea that we had. We got to build it and tried it because on the Olympic Games, a live show, you only have one go at it, right? So we had to test and build every idea. And, as a young, designer coming out, it taught me a lot. And from a drawing, engineering perspective, and I had to deal, and I had authority as a designer. I had to report to, the designers that I was working for, but it taught me a lot to communicate. And I think communication across such a big job is so important.
When you say
and vital.
communicate, what do you mean by that? Like, what's something on that set, that event, that you still now today, 20 years later, hold from that experience?
I think, collaboration, right? Especially on a job like the Olympic Games. There's so many people, so many voices, so many designers and creatives, and you have to learn how to collaborate and how to delegate as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think I learned to work with others, and to delegate and to communicate my ideas. And I remember sometimes there will be a room full of designers and we will try to workshop something, for example, and I will think about a particular thought or idea that I wanted to communicate, but I was too shy to say it. And then 5 minutes later, somebody else will say the same concept or the same thought. And then all of a sudden, it was their idea, even though I had thought about it before. And
they got all the credit.
Right. So they will take all the credit. So I also learned to speak up and not to be shy. Even if the idea doesn't make sense or is stupid to somebody or whatever, say it. Because out of that, something else might come up or the idea will roll into something else, right? So
you spend a decade and change working in Europe, working in Australia. You moved to the US in 2014. And you said, when I moved, I saw my departure from Australia to the US as a big risk. What were you risking in that moment? And what opportunities kind of opened up for you when you got here?
Well, I was somewhat working in Australia, in Sydney, and I had a community, a work community, and I was very comfortable. But I wanted to move to the US to grow my career. And so when I moved to New York from Sydney, I had hardly any contacts. I had a couple of contacts. But I had to really start knocking on people's doors, which I hadn't done since I left university. And so I had to really push out of myself, out of my comfort zone, to start emailing people, cold emails, knocking on people's doors. And I hadn't done that for a long time.
You pause here for 1 second, because there's a lot of people who send these cold emails who are here or watching. Give me, if you can bring us back, I'm sorry to make you do this, what would it sound like? Like Julio trying to introduce himself for a potential job. What was the case that you made for yourself?
I will start my emails by introducing myself and by just naming a few jobs that I was done in Australia that were relatable. At the time, I had done a couple of jobs for YouTube, for MTV, for Nickelodeon, and I will just and I will also say, I'm here, I've just moved to New York, but that didn't work. Not many people sort of emailed me back.
New in town didn't help. Okay.
No. But I think the big risk was for me that I basically kept pushing myself and I had to really start knocking on people's doors. And it's an uncomfortable feeling. Even if you're a professional and you're sort of set up, but you have to push yourself, because I kept thinking, if I don't do it, somebody else will, and that person's going to get the job. So
it was like the kid who had your idea back in class.
pretty much.
So tell me, I want to go to the next slide. This is you working Nickelodeon, the Kids' Choice Awards. You described this as a dream job. Now tell me about why this meant so much to you.
Well, I feel, there's been so many chapters in or so many great highlights in my career. And when I came to America, one of the first big entertainment jobs that I had was the Kids' Choice Awards. And I kind of grew up with the Kids' Choice Awards, right? And so for me, that was such a huge benchmark to start designing. And it was such a fun job. And so I was very honored to get, I guess, the Kids' Choice Awards. And prior to that, I had been working with Nickelodeon, but not the Kids' Choice Awards. I guess the Kids' Choice Awards was like doing the Super Bowl for me at the time. So it meant a lot to me.
When you see these two photos of a younger self, what do you see? Were you confident? Were you nervous about coming here and doing work here? What do you see in these two images besides the Sesame Street?
I think I see confidence. I think I always have confidence, even though sometimes I didn't know what I was doing, or I didn't really know what I was talking about. But I had the confidence, and I think people believed in me.
You're wearing a similar kind of cute shirt, so that's good.
Similar colors, yeah.
You knew what you look good in even then. You've described, I love this quote. You described designing for the stage as painting the landscape. So I want to wind our way to Eurovision, which you worked on. What does painting the landscape mean in something like this? I mean, this is unbelievable.
Well, I think I often talk about my work being quite minimalist, and I often say that I often just come up with an idea that is a bold brushstroke across the stage. And so I think it's about giving something to the audience that is meaningful, but not giving it quite like a painting. There's another dimensionality to a painting. So sometimes there's a bit of mystery to my designs, or another dimensionality to it, and that's what I mean about kind of creating a painting. But it also means physically decorating kind of a composition in a way that means something to the audience.
You have worked with so many different artists. I mean, there's Bad Bunny, there's Shakira, we can go down the line. Is there a commonality that you've seen with the productions and the events that go well in regards to those stars? Like, is there a common trait that they have that you find leads to a good experience? And what leads to a bad experience?
I think
You can name as many names as you like as well if you want.
I can't name any, but there are a few.
You have to sign an NDA for that?
Yeah. Um, I think some of the most successful collaborations that I've had with artists and producers is when they communicate. And I think, for example, a very successful collaboration is working with Shakira on her world tour, which is currently out on the road. We worked together for about a year with a whole creative team, and she had a big message to say in her album, and so we did a lot of research, and she communicated with us what that message was, which is all about resilience, and so she communicated a lot to us. And the first meeting that we went in, we basically we didn't even have designs, but we created mood boards and ideas that were about resilience, and she loved it. She was able to connect emotionally to what we presented. And I think it's a successful collaboration because she gave us so much to work with.
When you go to the Grammys, you've done them for 5 years now? It's
5 years.
Unbelievable. Tell me about the process of, I think you call it your romantic period, where you're designing and falling in love over and over again. Talk to us about that.
Well, in my studio, at Yellow Studio, we take the design process very seriously, meaning, there's always a timeline, there's always pressure from the client to deliver, there's always pressure. But we try to preserve a design process with respect, whether we have 2 weeks or 3 months. And that design process, I call it the romantic period, meaning we get to fall with ideas, we get to flirt with color and shape and form, right? And we get to fall with one idea, and then fall in love with one idea, and then you come back the next day and you think, I hate this idea now. Actually, I don't love it so much anymore. So that's what I mean about designing and falling in love and the romantic period of design, because you really get to flirt with color and so on. And so that's what I mean by it, and I value that time. And I think my team and I really do respect our time before we start presenting to our clients.
So in the beginning, you're kind of flirting with all these ideas. You're out there. At what time, if we're going to continue this romantic trend, at what time do you have to become monogamous to an idea and be wed to it?
Well, I like to think that we keep flirting all the time, even though we become monogamous at some point. But
you're like, actually, open relationships is what we're doing here. It's good.
If you like to call it that way. I think we have to be, I think there's a point where one can do too much research and have too many ideas. So you really have to be strict in your process on narrowing the concept of what speaks to you the most. But by the way, even though we present an idea to a client, it's always good to have 2 or 3 other ideas in your back pocket, because somebody might come in and they might not love this idea, even though you do, and so on. So,
do you always put your favorite idea first, or do you save it as a backup?
We put our favorite idea first.
Okay.
In the decks that we put together, we always put our favorite and then our second favorite. But we often don't say to the client, this is our favorite idea. We don't. We don't go in saying, I love this concept, because they might not love it. So we try to be a little bit more respectful of our vocabulary and how we use it. We are enthusiastic about it.
I want to swing back around to the Super Bowl performance, because you've said in the last 5 years, I've finally been able to be my authentic self in the work. What did you mean by that? I mean, what does that look and feel like to you in this moment?
I think I go back to the Super Bowl. I think for me, I said this at the beginning, when we worked with Benito, the only brief for us was to celebrate music and dance and to be authentic. And I think that really resonated with me, because every decision that we made was authentic to Puerto Rico and the Latin community. And I've been fortunate enough that as a Latin, as a Latin designer, working in this industry, I've been able to work with some incredible Latin artists, and somebody like Benito wanted to be authentic. As a designer, often we want to stylize everything, right? We want to make it monochromatic or make an abstract shape of a car or whatever, but he wanted to be authentic. So that little taco vendor that appeared had to be authentic, right? The car and so on. And I think it's a great lesson for us as designers and for myself to be authentic. And as Latin, I think it really resonated with me. And I feel like over the last 5 years, also, my Latinness is coming out more. I feel like I've been in the closet and finally come out with my Latinness because I grew up in Australia and I sort of explored with Australian culture for a while, but now I feel a bit closer to my Latin roots.
And how does that feel?
How does that feel? I think it feels very international. It feels more authentic. It feels more true to who I am, and I want to keep celebrating this feeling.
My last question for you, and I think it's on a lot of people's minds, is like we're entering or we're already in this age of artificial intelligence. And you work hand in hand with technology, whether it's Eurovision, the Grammys. I mean, there's so much of your work that you work alongside tech. I want to know where you land on this because tell me about the balance between maintaining the humanity of a piece, the soul of a piece, while also using these new technological tools that can help you fast track the work. I mean, it also is risking, we've already seen human contribution kind of recede in some places. How are you thinking about that in this moment?
Well, I want to answer that question by going back before AI, and I want to talk about technology in general because we use technology in our designs all the time. I'm sure we all do here, and certainly myself in my studio. But we don't let the idea being driven by technology. We try to come up with the idea ourselves and come up with an emotion connection to the audience. And then we use technology to help us as a tool to enhance what the idea might be. But we try not to really just come up with ideas with a very basic principle. So I wanted to say that because it's the same with AI. I feel like in our studio, we use AI more and more, and we've learned to use it rather than be against it. And we use it as a tool that helps us to enhance our ideas, but not to come up with ideas.
I want to know, as we go, looking at this photo again, now that it's been a few months since this happened, is there a moment, and I know you guys planned it out as exacting as possible, but was there a moment when it happened that ended up being even better than you ever could have imagined? Like a moment that you plotted that could, oh my God, this is even more moving than I anticipated.
I think on the Super Bowl, seeing the grass costume become a cultural moment during that time, and all those little memes about the costumes was something that I never expected to happen. We made the decision of these grass costumes from a logistical perspective, not because we thought, oh, this would be a cute idea.
Yeah.
And the fact that it just became what it did, it was an incredible feeling. And I get emotional still every time I see these sort of funny memes. But that was a moment that I thought, wow, I've never been involved in something that has had an effect like this.
It was unbelievable and so ingenious. And I just want to say as we go, even if people didn't care about football, they cared about the Super Bowl performance and all the work you and your team put into it. I think that night, I looked it up this morning, the performance was 13 minutes and 42 seconds. And for 13 minutes and 42 seconds, everything in this country seemed all right. I can't tell you what happened after, but for those 13 minutes and 42 seconds, this vision for the country, I think, is one that we could see and use more of. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.